The meeting has started, gentlemen. Yes, be extra quiet. So we have a meeting session from 5:15 to 6 p.m. I'm going to suggest that we start off now. I'll recognize our police chief. I will recognize him. I'm going to suggest 30 minutes for the presentation and reserving the last 15 minutes for commissioner questions or any other comments that may have. So that'll take us to 5:45. At 5:45, I'd like to open up the floor for the commissioners to ask questions. That sound like a reasonable. So while we go through the presentation, if you got questions, I just ask that you take notes, and at 5:45, I'll open it up for the remaining 15 minutes for QA. With that, Chief, recognize you.
Hey, thank you, Mayor. I wanted to first thank you and the Board of Commissioners and our city manager, deputy city manager staff for the just the continued support of the project. We know that this project has been some time, spanning a couple of budget cycles now, but we are grateful for your support of the project. Also, through this project, we've tried to be as conservative as possible. Our theme for the entire project has been about durable, right, functional, and then having, being reliable, having a space that meets the needs of our department and our city. And so we've been very conservative with our mindset going forward with this project, and want to, again, before I turn it over to Captain Chandler, who has been kind of like our internal project manager on this, want to introduce the architect team, James Keenan, Carrie Sweat, and then the construction man, Joe Carden. They're here as well. So I'm going to turn it in now to Captain Chandler.
Thank you, Chief, and thank you all for y'all's continued support. We've been going at this for some time now and been providing you updates as best as we can through the process, but we really wanted to bring you here together for a detailed update, but just to also get your feedback on where we stand. We started with the original plan after the 2020 tornado to renovate our current facility. That got us to a cost that you wanted us to try to achieve a different option. Land was purchased out front in front of our building, and then we started the process of what that would look like on that land. And we reached that process. Today isn't something super detailed. We're going to see where different offices are, but just to give you an idea, we've determined the square footage that we will need, the mechanical systems, electrical systems, everything to get us to some type of number to present to y'all as we continue to move forward, and just to give you the expectation on what this is going to cost us. Through the presentation, you're going to see different comparisons through other cities, comparing the different costs per square foot, but also comparing the amount of space those other police departments offer that their police officers. And one thing I just want you to know that our police department, our police officers, they do a lot than other cities when you look at the numbers. Since the statistical data maybe last month, and they bring in more evidence than the city of Franklin. They do more proactive work than the city of Franklin, and this isn't by per capita. This is by stats as a whole. Same than Brentwood, and then other cities that we compared similar to Lebanon. Our officers work their, lack of a better word, rear end off. And just like you saw it today, another stolen vehicle in our city, and the work that they do keeps this city as safe as can be. They're a component of that. Other components that keep this city safe are things we do with City Beautiful, right? Things we do in our building efforts and our code efforts collectively as a community. But a major component of what keeps this city safe are the men and women who are out there every day. And they work so hard because they know the support that they have from this community, but the support that y'all continue to provide as an elected body. But where we stand now is becoming quickly deficient and inefficient in our operations. We have maxed out our space. Again, we're not in a safe building if another wind event would come through. We have critical operations inside that facility, such as dispatch. And very soon we will be taking on EMS dispatch. and we don't have the space to expand our dispatch center for that EMS operation. So there's some different patching that we're going to have to do with staff and limit our EMS dispatch operations where we can't use it at the full capacity, maybe how it should be, just because we don't have the space or the equipment for that. We reached a point as a department, as we continue to grow, where we need to continue to invest in our staff. And this is part of our investment. And I'm just grateful for all the input that our staff has given, our architect team and our construction management team. They've met with all of our staff members. We've had difficult conversations with our staff members who maybe wanted more things that we simply decided that that's going to rise that cost up. We need to limit those things. You'll notice different cost-saving measures that we're trying to implement to keep this building as conservative as possible. So we provide a good product to our community, we provide a good product to our police officers and staff, and we continue to be frugal, durable, and functional. Those are the three words that we continue to focus on through this building. And James and Carrie know at every option I've asked them, how can we cut cost? How can we cut cost? To try to keep it as small as possible and push the dollar as much as we can push it to get it something reasonable for our city. Because really, when we're done with this, it's a police department. It's the house where we operate out of, but it's the community's building. And we want to ensure we provide a good product that is within code, that is within the proper standards that are set for communication centers, and also safe for our people. But I just want to turn it over again to James and Carrie and Joel as they go through this presentation to give you an idea of what we've been working with. Thank y'all for your time today.
Thank you, Captain. Thank you, Chief. We have about 12 slides to go through. I was messing with the cattle on my farm this weekend, so if I'm hard to hear, I apologize. We just want to stress that really, like Captain said, what we're trying to do is build a tool for them to do their job. We're not trying to do some monumental piece of architecture, we're trying to build a nice tool and a building that reflects the community. And so as Captain was saying, our keywords are durable, frugal, and functional. Those are the things we use to judge the decisions being made. And I wanted to emphasize that, we're your consultant. We're working for you, and so we want your input. We want to understand what your priorities are for this building and make sure we're all in sync as we move forward. We've projected a growth out to 2040 based on a lot of the hard work the department did in projecting how their department was going to grow over that time. Safe long-term, and a civic building that represents your community, but without extravagance. You'll see these colors: the public lobby, records, command, patrol, investigation, evidence, dispatch. That's the parts and pieces of this building. There's lots of parts and pieces to a police building. The other thing we want to remind, I think we talked about this in February, that, you may think of it as an office building, but it's much more than an office building. Because the building code recognizes this as a building that needs to be there in any kind of storm event, because they need to serve the community that they're in, it requires that the structure be designed to 150% stronger than any other building to ensure its survivability. Not survivability for a tornado, but major events. Then Tennessee Emergency Communication Board and NFPA 1221 are also regulations that come over dispatch. I moved it over here. There we go. All right, you're in charge of that one. They have to have a public storm shelter. The building code has now started adding that when you have assembly spaces in the building. We've learned to accommodate that by basically kind of making some shared public space a little bit bigger than would have to be just for a corridor, to be conservative about how we do that. We try not to build a storm shelter that's never used for anything else. Ballistic protection is unfortunately a thing that comes with these buildings. They have been very clear about minimizing that, but unfortunately, in times that people handling records need some kind of ballistic protection for people to come in. There's concern for vehicles running into the building. There's a lot of evidence as chiefs and captains said, that's stored. There's regulations and guidelines for how to store that, both for prosecution and also just for general health, making sure it's ventilated, because there's a lot of nasty stuff that they take into evidence. We want to protect the officer's health. And then interview rooms are like small little recording studios. So we wanted to graphically show you, we went through the space needs this late summer, and from February when we last met to now, y'all gave them more responsibility, you know, and with that responsibility came more space needs. You also made a decision to move CID into the building. And so as we went through that, we're thinking the building's gonna be about 44,000 square feet. And that's divided between patrol, investigation, public, common areas, which include stairs and elevators, dispatch, evidence, command and support. And then we still have the annex buildings off back. One of the nice things about when you bought that property, decided to keep the property, we're able to push the annex building back against the park and make it less architecturally significant to the community. We're able to kind of downgrade the quality of its construction because it's going to be a background building, whereas before, when we were keeping the building, it was right up front and it was hadn't spent some money for brick and other things. So we wanted to kind of show you, all right, that's the space needs. The things that got added between February and now is the investigation department, restrooms and stairs and elevators, because we went from a 1-story to a 2-story building, municipal codes, and that was about 10,000 square feet on top of the 32 that we thought we were at previously. So that's kind of how the building grew since we last met. And then we're going to give you a sense of, when you look at a building like this, it's got all kinds of different parts and pieces to it. It's got everything from a giant warehouse for evidence, which is pretty inexpensive, relatively inexpensive space, to a dispatch center with all the technology and mechanical and electrical redundancy that a dispatch center has to have. And so we kind of just graphically, from light blue to dark blue, show you kind of how that cost migrates across those different spaces. So then we wanted to start and look at the size of building we're projecting for your department compared to some surrounding areas. And one of the key numbers we look at is number of sworn officers and the amount of square footage per officer. That seems to be kind of a commonality that you can evaluate. So you can see this is a list of different surrounding areas, everything from Tullahoma to Spring Hill, and the number of sworn officers they have, and the amount of square footage per officer. And you can see that we're in the lower quantity, 350 square feet per officer, compared to some of the other facilities, kind of regardless of the amount of square footage we have. You can see Brentwood is up to 522 square feet per officer. So what I want to do is I'm going to go through all this with you and then let you come back and ask questions. So basic concept is similar to where we were previously. Main building out front, 2 stories, an entrance facing the side entry drive. And then the existing building remains. And then the annex, we've actually split into 2 smaller buildings, pushed back against the park. Some of the earlier concept studies we did, when you were thinking about purchasing the property, had about 10 more feet of property than what you actually wound up purchasing. So we had to squeeze everything up a little bit. And so projecting forward is the courtroom and the training area. So how that would be divided is on the main floor. You can see the green is the public coming in, interfacing. And then the dark blue is the patrol functions. The orange is lab and evidence type functions. There's a little public on the back side for evidence return and defense attorney viewing of evidence. And then upstairs is command, dispatch, investigative services on the back. We put dispatch on the northeast side so that as they work 24/7, they actually can see some north daylight, which is nice, and some eastern sunrise. EOC, the ECC is tucked into the middle of the building. Command and admin is tucked along the front facing the public way. And the lobby, again, is on the ground floor. So we want to kind of walk through some of the cost-saving measures. And we're going to use the word conservative a couple times this night. So on one hand, you were saying conservative, and that way we're talking that we're trying to not be over extravagant. We're trying to be careful and frugal with it. When Joel's using conservative over here, what he's trying to say is he's put together an estimate that he thinks is reasonable, not over the top, but not cutting it to the bare bone yet. He wants to be at a place to tell you he thinks it's going to be this much and be able to work his way down as we refine the drawings. So we're using conservative kind of in two different realms, but I think with the same intent, if that makes sense. We're using a lot of open workspaces, not giving a lot of private offices. Every detective and every CID department we've ever worked with wants their own private office because they have all these phone calls they have to make. And every commission that has to fund the building goes, I can't afford private offices. And so we try to find that good balance of large open offices against private offices. So they have a good work environment, handle it with acoustics, but not give everybody their own little private office. Multifunction planning. Most of the rooms, as we go through, there's several conference rooms and training rooms. They're seen as being able to use for multiple purposes, like the ECC is also the departmental conference rooms. So they don't intend to have rooms that sit there and only get activated at one point in time. They're used every day for multiple things. I mentioned the storm shelter serves as circulation space. We just found, if I got to have a hallway to get from point A to point B, and it's right near where we need storm shelter, make the hallway about 4 feet wider, we can accommodate the needs for storm shelter and not have to build a dedicated storm shelter space. Any ballistic is very limited toward the very front where the public interfaces with the building. And by y'all's decision, y'all backed off of rating it for tornado. So it's just treated as a essential service facility. It's not tornado resistant anymore because now you have that agreement where you're sharing 911 with Wilson County, correct? We're going to protect the building from crazy people trying to run their car into it. We're going to use grade and dirt to raise the building up and not spend a lot of money on bollards. And then, like we said, we push the annex back to the back. And then to minimize the overall square footage in the building, we spend a little more money buying shelving that's high density and don't have to have as much space. And there's always an intermediate ground where you buy shelving that accommodates your needs right now, knowing that in 10 years when you outgrow that, you go buy the high density shelving and backfill it at that point in the same space. You want to walk me through this budget?
Me? Yeah.
Yeah, you.
I'm sorry. Thank you, James.
Joel.
Thank-
This is Joel
thank you
Carden.
all. Joel Carden with the parent company. I appreciate the time tonight. And so basically what James and Carrie have provided is a concept plan based on square footage of the building, a site plan, square footages of the annex, et cetera. And we have taken our historical cost data based on square footage of existing buildings that we've built in the past and applied that to a range normally of what we give on the low range of so non-conservative and then conservative based on square footage of the building and a square foot cost that we've established. The site plan is fairly defined. There's not a whole lot of variation in that number. So I believe this number was the middle of the range that we had come up with for building and site for both. And I'm just referring to the left side of the screen. The right side of the screen is soft costs, which I think are
We'll speak to soft
we'll
costs.
probably go into next. But more or less, the left side is building construction, supervision, overhead, and then site costs as well. So.
And we've given you a lot of the soft costs itemized here. They may be a little small for reading, but it's strictly to help you guys get a sense of this kind of overall project budget that we try to help cities out with as we're doing these facilities, because we've learned over time that a lot of the costs in a project aren't being captured by just the building construction. We want to make sure that it's within sight. So a lot of these things, in fact, all of the right half over there, what we call soft costs, they're not going to be in Joel's construction contract. Several of them right now are included in his building construction contract, but we can discuss with him and with your representatives which place you want to do it. So high density shelving, for example, you can actually buy that yourself without going through him. For the time being, we've asked him to go ahead and include that in the building cost, just as an estimation purposes, but we can fine tune areas like that beyond that.
Typically, we find that on a police facility, 18 to 20% of the construction costs winds up being soft costs. And that's about where we are with this. We built it backwards and we validated it, which is nice when that happens. So in summary, we're projecting that the building could be anywhere from 21.9 to 24.6 with soft cost of 4.4 to 4.8, which puts us in the project cost in the 26.3 to 24.9 million dollar range. 20, what did I say? 29.4. And then lastly, we gathered some information just on some of the buildings we had done and other surrounding neighboring cities to look at what they had been spending. Had a good conversation with Chief Bright and Spring Hill because they just bid out their building. It's comparable in size, 44 to 57. Brentwood, we just completed in 2019, and we found the original cost and then projected it forward to 2022 because of the crazy escalation we've seen lately. And you can see that buildings were running anywhere from 383 to 657 a square foot, and we're in the 525, and that's a construction cost. And with that, we provide you all the information. We're here to answer questions.
All right. Well, thank you for the presentation. Let's see, we've got, looks like 22-ish minutes left. So we got 5 commissioners there. So if we can, I'll be quick with my question. So I think I'll leave about 20 minutes. That should be about 5 minutes each for these guys. But my question comes down to soft cost versus hard cost on this. And it's particularly around financing models of this. It wasn't implying that we would be financing some of the soft costs when it comes to like IT equipment with a limited lifespan on it in like a 20, 30, 40, 1,000-year bond or whatever we're doing on this. Because I've seen this done in other places, and we're not that a finance question, I guess. That's not the recommendation.
No, that would not be the recommendation. And to be honest, our financial situation is quite good
Okay.
at this time. I would limit a borrowing for this.
Do it as needed.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, with that, I guess just Commissioner Mullally.
Mayor, I'd add, I know the captain has a game plan with a lot of dispatch, because based on the construction sequence, several of those pieces of equipment are due to be replaced anyway as part of the ongoing expenses of the city. So he's planning to overlap those.
Perfect. All right. Commissioner, we'll give you the floor for 5 minutes if you have any questions.
I do have a curiosity question. Why the dispatch would not be on the first floor? I noticed it was on the second floor.
It's a good question. There's a limited amount of area we have. we know we want patrol on the ground floor. We know we want public interaction on the ground floor. And we know we want evidence on the ground floor because it weighs so much and it goes in and out and it's tied to patrol. So time we look at those, we need to stack stuff on top of it. Dispatch is a quiet zone. Public doesn't really interact with it. If we put them upstairs, we can put them in a secure area. We can get them daylight views out so they're not in a rabbit warren somewhere. And it's been shown that if we can get dispatchers a nice work environment with some outside views, they actually tend to stay around after you spend the money training them, and you don't lose them to another facility. So kind of putting all those together is why I've been putting dispatch up the floor. We did that in Murfreesboro, Brentwood as well.
Okay. That was my main question for now. So if anybody else has any.
Thanks, Mayor. I got a few. I see you're building this for a growth of projection of 2040. Is that correct?
Yes.
Can you hear me? So once this is built out, if it's approved, what's your utilization on the building if you're building out for a capacity of 2024?
I think there's many options, really, with what the city would like to do. I think, once we get a building that we plan out for 2040, there will be some empty space, right? There will be some empty offices. So, for example, if City Hall has a department that works well together and interacts with police together, you could potentially move them out of this building and into that building, right? And clear up space here. So using them as an example, our IT department, they house these offices here, those offices there. You could essentially move them right in with us for some 100% utilization when we first move in, and maybe some other departments that work well with police. I think you have to be mindful about the security and interaction. The good thing is with an IT department or any other public safety department, they have the typical checks and balances and background checks that are required to be in those certain environments in a full-time capacity. And if it works well with us, and again with the the mindset of the city, I think you can be at 100%. And then as we continue to grow, and as the city continues to grow in other capacities and builds other buildings, then they can move out, right? As we then have to grow into that space.
Do you have a sense of what that day one utilization is?
I don't, simply because we haven't had those conversations with Mr. Martin to understand that.
No, I mean for just police. I mean, you build a
with just
52,000 square foot building. How much on day one is actually going to be utilized by the police department versus?
It's hard to say, but I would say we would probably be at 60 to 70%, because where we grow mainly is with our patrol, right? And our patrol and also dispatch. So they have their space. Patrol is out in the field, so they're not being inside or utilizing much space inside other than those shared workspaces that we're integrating. We're integrating shared workspaces with our shift supervisors who are only inside for a brief amount of time and they go out to the road, right? So I would say 60 to 70%. Where you'll see extra space are a few extra offices in the admin area as our command staff will grow as the city grows. A few extra areas in our investigative division where they may initially start out where it'll be one detective for a little block of space, but as we grow, there'll be two detectives in that common work area. There'll also be some empty space that we're not going to put any walls up just because we don't know what the future holds, right? Just 2 years ago, we would have never thought we would get a mental health specialist on staff or our codes enforcement on staff, but as the city grows and as we adapt, we want the building to also be adaptable rather than just block us into something that's going to limit us. But I think there's a lot of opportunity there that we can continue to hash out as we go further with design. We don't really know much about the layout. We kind of have an idea, right? But we don't know where the walls are going. We don't know where the offices are going per se. And we can have those harder conversations if that's the will of the city to try to be at more capacity.
Okay, I appreciate it. I got 3 more questions. Promise I'll be quick. I noticed in the slide, it was quoted at per officer, square foot. I forget which slide 3 or 4. So do you have, and you can get back to me on this, but what would be the square foot per administrator? Because I'm assuming officers, you're including patrolmen in that, which,
It's sworn officers, so like they're all sworn officers.
Yeah.
What we're leaving out is civilian that work.
but I'm thinking patrol officers are in their vehicles, not necessarily sitting
Yeah,
at a
it's
desk.
just, it's a metric we can use across different buildings.
Do you have by administration?
Well, administration, there's only about 5 of them,
Okay.
right? There's a chief, 2 deputy chiefs, captain.
I guess the harder part with just administration, every city is different in their administration, right? And who has office, who doesn't have an office.
Mhm.
One thing we looked at to ensure that we're conservative in our own offices is getting the standard from James about how big certain offices are. I mean, there's some administrators that do wild things with their offices in different police departments around us. We're nowhere near that type of space. We didn't exceed what we're currently in. It's basically just plopping what we got right into another building.
Okay, appreciate that.
Yeah.
I noticed there's a GC contingency fee of over $1 million. Can you explain what that is?
Typically at this stage of design, which we were concept design based on essentially square footage of building, we like to have a hefty contingency just as we move forward into the additional design phases, schematic design, construction documents. There's a cushion there more or less because right now it's just that number is based on a square footage of the building based on past building history.
So the contingency is
It's a
your
cushion.
contingency.
It's a cushion. Construction contingency.
It's our contingent. This
Yeah,
whole
it's
team's
your-
contingency.
Yeah, correct. It's
Okay.
the city's money, but we typically carry 5 to, that 5% range and that will reduce maybe down to 3% once you get to construction documents.
Okay, fair enough. Last question, sorry, you probably know. What's the current square footage? that we're-
14.5.
So total, including criminal, the facilities that the investigation?
Oh, no. Investigations is another 2,800, I believe.
So 14.5 and 20?
Plus 2,800. I think it was close to 18.
Okay. So, okay, got it. Thanks.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate it.
All right. Commissioner Trevette?
Thank you, Mayor. Well, first of all, thank you all for joining here tonight. I know there was some discussions about a basement, I guess, if there was an opportunity. I know that was kind of a roll around there for evidence for future growth. Obviously, that's going to be cut out because of costs, or was it just because the ground was not acceptable, or what was there?
I think our biggest thing was cost.
Okay.
And we're trying to be as conservative as we can here. And the biggest thing was we knew if we had to dig down, it would cost us more.
Sure. Okay. Obviously, as Commissioner Hefner had stated, about the future growth, obviously it looks like between the 14.5 and the 28, obviously we're going to be doubling that and then some. So is it something that we could be looking at as in maybe the spacing, as the space is not being, let's just say, built out all the way currently right now to be able to, save some cost if there's an option there? Or is that, because I know that was discussed several meetings ago, that we would just kind of like leave a certain area of the building, ready for future growth. So that way it doesn't just all of a sudden turn into whatever. It actually gets used as we start to grow. Then we can be able to look at that, more phased into it, I guess. So is that an option that we could be looking at?
Yeah, we try to do that because I think, as you probably know, they're composed of a series of discrete pieces, right?
I understand.
And
Yeah.
so patrol grows, CID grows, admin grows a little bit, and so you want to leave space in the building for each of those to grow, not a big chunk in one place. But yes, then we can leave some unfinished space in each of those. Another level of that is, there's a lot of money in furniture.
Sure.
We can finish the floor and the ceiling and only buy, I'm going to make up a number. If there's only 6 detectives right now and they plan to grow to 12, you only buy 6 pieces of furniture right now.
Sure.
And
Okay.
just leave the rest of it. Does that answer your question, sir?
Yeah, absolutely. As I think it was either one of the other commissioners that had mentioned about the bond, is it an opportunity to maybe, because as I was looking at the schedule here, we're looking at September 19, 2024 before construction. Is this something that we want to consider looking at, maybe getting one bond for the police department and fire for, or is that just going to muddy the waters even more? And I'm just asking that question.
Yeah, I think that's maybe more for Dana to answer, but I think our construction, if we continue on track, we'll start May, June with,
The 2023 or,
yes.
okay.
But I don't think we would need to would even look at a borrowing until FY24, just because the way these costs are and how well we're doing. That's certainly something we can look at, though, is adding something in for fire.
Okay.
That's a possibility.
I'm just asking because I know that there's a cost for bonds, and if you can get one,
Mhm.
one bond versus 3 or 4 or whatever we need here, that could be an option. And then the other last question I have here is just the, obviously, I mean, with the space being built out, if there is any type of remodeling for the city building here, if there's, if the city decides to go ahead and either remodel this building or move from this building, is there still opportunity for these folks here to all be able to utilize the space of the police department? And I know there's some security areas, but is there other areas within that we can be looking at? I know that's kind of, counterintuitive to my last question, before we go building out the space to it. But these are some questions that we want to be able to think about if there's remodeling as well as some future growth there as well.
Right. I think again, more the will of the city, but as we know these different opportunities going into our design phase, we can plan for it. But we, and we'll hopefully vacate what we're in and move into the police building. So that leaves another city building. Part of the site that's going to be unused or maybe hasn't been designated for something yet, but part of the site plan is incorporating that building with adding the parking for it already, realigning the walking trails for the park. So the site plan development isn't just the police department, it's to ensure that existing building has plenty of parking as well, and also realigns the walking trail so it all works well together as different civic buildings on that same piece of property with Charlie Daniels Park. But I think there's plenty of opportunities there. Knowing this, going into it, we can choose to build out more space, put in certain offices and areas if the city wants to get us in something. Our biggest risk as a police department is we need the space, right? We need a more substantial hardened facility. We need a facility where I'm not sitting in my office or the records clerks have to smell marijuana all day because we have bad exhausting of our evidence room. It's not built how it should be built. Right? Sure. What we're in is great. It was a great opportunity at the time. It got us significantly ahead of where we were at the time. It's just we continue to grow, right? And we're rapidly growing in other areas, such as our EMS system that's on board that we're responsible to dispatch for, and such as our police department. We're growing. Our growth plan has us adding 4 to 6 officers per year to maintain with the current growth that we have. And we obviously evaluate that every year to see if we continue to have that need each year. But we're planning for the future. And I just hope that the number we have in 2040 for the number of police officers is where we're going to end up being, right? And it's not going to be more than that.
Sure.
But we're trying to give our best educated, researched option of where we need to be in 2040 and what we can go in now, but also allow us to flex and grow as we grow into the future city. And this building will be around for a long, long time, and we can all be proud of it, right?
No, thank you.
Vice Mayor?
Do you know what the square footage of the Wills County Sheriff's Department is?
I do not know that.
Okay. It's not listed on there as a comparable department.
Yeah, we compared police departments, but they just substantially added a large facility. And that's where we kind of captured some opportunity there with their dispatch center, because their dispatch center is hardened like a bunker. And
Yeah, they actually built a jail though, right?
they sold it as a jail. It's more than a jail. They're getting a lot of,
It's sold as a jail, but wait, was more of a what? I'm sorry.
it's way more than a jail. They have a communication center, they have more offices, they have more training rooms, they have more evidence storage. It's a jail. It's a new jail, but it's also a lot of other things as well.
So they didn't tell the truth when they.
I'm not going to go into what they
Okay.
said.
I was just curious.
I'm sure their
So-
commissioner saw the details.
Out of the 70% utilization that you said was would be initial in this new building, how much of that is associated with patrol?
We can pull up the square footage again, but it's very small.
What percentage?
I was looking at the space needs projection, and currently, first baseline is 75 officers, 43 non-sworn, growing to 126 officers, 58 non-sworn. And of that growth, about 30 or so are just patrol growing. Whereas like a lot of the other areas, admin, you get one chief, you don't add a chief. Those aren't shown as growing. Dispatch grows a little bit. It goes from 12 dispatchers to 18 across that time period. So that's a growth of basically 3 shifts at 6 staff consoles. So they need 4 staff consoles now. They need 6 by the end. So that's an example of only buying 4 consoles right now. Records clerk stays the same. Evidence tech toward the end, they think may need to add 1 evidence tech. Patrol is the major growth. Investigation has some growth, kind of 5 drug detectives up to 7, 5 general detectives up to 10. A little community engagement growth. So it's incremental across all those departments. The largest though is patrol.
The largest part of it is patrol.
Yeah.
Okay. I will tell you, I'm retired law enforcement. And so one of the things that I remember, initially many years ago, just shortly after the rock and the chisel that we did our reports on.
I know those too. I know
yeah.
those.
So we then moved to paper, and we were expected to be in our patrol car. We didn't go to the office unless they called us in, and half the time it was out front on the hood of the patrol car. We were doing the reports. Then, of course, we got the computers, and we learned that we were dispatched, and we could do the reports, and everything that we did could be done in our patrol cars. It kept us on the road and kept us out in the public. So increasing building size for patrol has not ever been a priority because of the amount of time that they spend in their patrol cars and should spend in their patrol cars, not going to a police department. So all that being said, I'm curious as how are we going to pay for this?
Commissioner, I can't address that part of what you're talking about. As far as the growth of the building, the square footage of the building, when you break it down, the actual square footage dedicated to patrol is very small for the reason that you just stated. But the vast majority of the building is for the support services for each one of those officers. As they do grow, you're right, they're not going to be spending a lot of time in the building unless they're dropping evidence, more space, unless they're doing their reports and we're having to house those reports, more space in records, more calls for service coming into dispatch, more space in dispatch. So although the number of officers is growing, and that's the vast majority of our growth, the square footage of the building is dedicated to the support services for those officers, not the officers themselves.
Minus the 30% that's not going to be utilized initially, correct? Okay. So the other.
So when you speak about that 30%, so that would be like a briefing room or a training room, right? Where we just build that a little bit larger because we expect to eventually have more officers sitting in the briefing room before they hit the street. So right now, we may be utilizing 12 of those seats, but we want to prepare for 20 of those seats, right? Because that's what our shifts will grow to. Our training room, trying to be conservative, we thought about it's a little bit bigger than what we have now, just by barely. But what we added into this to be conservative was just a divider. So we could have different trainings going on with smaller classes if we wanted to, or use as a community room.
In addition to that, Commissioner, both when me and you both started, it was a completely different world in police work.
Oh, I agree
When
with
me and
that.
you both started, the term lactation room was not something we would have been commonly associated with. We'd probably have to look up a dictionary to find out what that meant.
I'm going to as soon as this meeting's over, actually.
That is something we're required to have now. As the time changes, as society changes, who knows what that next room is going to be that nobody's anticipating we're going to need now, and we're going to need that space. So when that happens, we know what to do. Quiet rooms. When we talked about quiet rooms when me and you started, there was a chair in that lobby out there.
Right.
That's not what that is anymore. So we
Okay.
got to plan for what we don't know.
Okay.
And provide a refrigerator for that room.
That's true.
I will tell you also, and this is not anything you guys have anything to do with at this point, but I will say that discussing the amount of money that we're talking about puts us at risk of blowing up bids when somebody sees it, and they could possibly do it at a cheaper rate. But because of the way government works, the inconvenience of government, everything about it, this is completely backwards from what it should be. I mean, we shouldn't be up here talking about, oh, we're going to spend $28 million. Oh, by the way, what's your bid going to be?
Well, I think
Well, what do
we
you think
already-
it's going to be?
We already secured our contract manager that's going to manage this. And I think, Joel, can you speak on
It
that?
doesn't matter. Anything you say or do at this point, $28 million is going to be the bar that they're looking for. And yeah, so we already know that. This happened to us numerous times. There's not anything you can do about it. What I would suggest is that you come in with a different plan, though, that comes in with about 30% less than what you got on the board now as far as building, because this thing went from $6 million of hardening a police department, and we had all kinds of bids. So, oh, well, that's a great thing. We can, harden what we've got. And then we turn around and it's $18 million. And now we're looking at $28 million. And I'm looking at a new city hall that's going to have to be built. And we're looking at parks that are going to have to be maintained and built and fixed. Yeah. I've got a hard
There's
time
lot
with
of-
28.
There's a lot of options out there, but I don't know of a different way to do it. We've done it every legal process through what we're required to do, with bidding it out, with informing you, through working with Dana and these architects. Everything you have up here today is what we've had to legally do the right way to get it in front of you by what's required by law. That's why we're here. And the biggest thing that I kept getting was, what's the cost? What's the cost? What's the cost? From everyone up here. And I've worked as hard as I can to get that cost to y'all. And this is the meeting to do that.
Well, I would tell you, the court and community room, a lobby, vestibule, restrooms, conference and storage and support, staff offices and workstation, I get, briefing room, I get, storage and support is huge. Then another support space on the other side over near where municipal codes would be, and another conference room. What I would say is you start shrinking your square footage drastically. And I mean, to get my vote, $28 million is not going to get my vote.
think if
I
we
can't vote for
shrink
that.
Our square footage, we would be at risk in 10 years. And we would build a building that we couldn't fit in.
Okay, you're talking about going to a 44,000 square foot building, right? And right now we've got 14,000. And you're saying that we've got to have 30,000 square foot added in 10 years, or we're going to be at risk. And then you also stated that was by law. So I'm not sure that the law actually mandates that we have an additional $30,000 or 30,000 square feet. So, what I'm pointing at this point, all I'm saying is, our budget, we got a budget.
Yeah.
I would love the police department to have a $28 million square foot building, or a $28 million building. I really would.
We would just hate to invest in something that we're going to have to come to you again in a couple of years and say, guess what? We're out of space, because we try to project our growth as best as possible. The city keeps growing at drastic rates. We're having to add police officers at drastic rates. And as a police department in general, with the climate, we deal with different risk every day that's new to us, that we have to try to adapt to. But this is also a big recruitment and retention tool for our department. The questions that we get from people from out of town wanting to come work for us, they ask these questions. They want to know, what kind of support do you have in the community? What kind of equipment do you have? Are you running short? Do you have any vacancies? Do you offer childcare, which we don't? That's fine. Do you offer fitness rooms for them? Do you have strong support from your dispatch centers? This is a different world. We're lucky. Our staff is absolutely amazing. I'm not saying that because I have the position to work with them every day. I'm saying it because I do the research. I look at the data. I see what other departments deal with. Smyrna, they're down 14. Hendersonville, down 8. City of Gallatin, down somewhere in the 10s. Murfreesboro, down 56. Excuse me. And in the cities where I see that they're able to maintain officers that maintain safety are ones that invest in their police department. City of Franklin, City of Brentwood, and the City of Mount Juliet. We're all up there on your top tier.
Good.
We're trying to give you a good product.
Well, appreciate the presentation here tonight, and thank you all for coming. We've gone a little bit over time, but I think it's all been a healthy discussion. So at this point, I'll propose that we adjourn this workshop. I think we've got something very important coming up next. I believe it involves cake. So,
Thank you all.
yep. If there's no objection, we will adjourn until we have a public hearing at 6:15 and the regular scheduled meeting at 6:30.